This is Jonathan St. James, and you're listening to The Truth is Still Straight podcast. All right, folks, this is a Saturday edition. You may not be watching or listening on Saturday, but today is July 17th, 2021. Hopefully, Jim can stop shaking that camera and not give me freaking dizzy spells over here.
I am not shaking the camera no more.
Okay. All right. What's going on in the world? Okay. First and foremost, of course, my man Biz Markie passed away. I wanted to talk about that. For those of you who were born yesterday, you may not know who he is. He had some wonderful songs, Just a Friend, The Biz is Going Off, Vapors, Nobody Beats the Biz. Trying to think of course, one of my favorites, Picking Boogers, I'll Be Square More.
Obviously, yes.
Yeah. And he was a part of the legendary Juice Crew with Kool G Rap and DJ Polo, Craig G, Master Ace, Big Daddy Kane, and MC Shan with Marley Marl and Roxanne Shante. That was the crew back then. Of course, KRS-One, the original Tekashi 6ix9ine, was clout chasing, and he just started a rivalry with the Bridge Is Over and South Bronx. So, and the rest is history. Because for all of those who listened to The Bridge, they didn't talk about rap starting in Queens. They just started how it started out for them in Queensbridge. So, of course, shout out to Biz Markie. Rest in peace, brother. Miss you. Mission Music. For those of you who didn't know, he was a DJ after rap. I mean, he still performed. And the funny story that I heard is either last year or not last year, I don't think. Either last year or the year before, I can't remember. The New York State Association of Black and Puerto Rican Legislators had a conference weekend. And at the event, apparently, Biz Markie was at the wrong venue.
Oh, wow.
Went into a different location and ended up performing there, even though he wasn't supposed to be there. Interesting story. So some people got a free show from Biz Markie, which I thought was pretty cool. Yeah, all right, folks. Okay, we're gonna start this show now, and we're gonna get into it. We're gonna get into our relationship topic, and of course, today's topic is problems with lack of accountability. And why is that a problem? Because when people lack accountability, they lack the ability to grow in relationships. So you have someone who cannot be accountable for their actions, but often hold others accountable for theirs, and sometimes will hold you accountable for something that they do and you didn't do at all. That happens quite often. So the problem there is you could really like someone, but the person's ability to be accountable for things they do wrong, things they say wrong, flaws and all, as Beyonce would say, things that make you go, And that's a problem with relationships because, all right, in the honeymoon phase, when you meet people and you like them and you like the smell of them and the taste of them, you may put up with that, but those things fade after a while when all you have left is each other. Whatever goals that you had in terms of establishing a relationship have been established, whether it was just aiming for sex or whether it's just aiming to be boyfriend and girlfriend, whatever it is, husband or wife even sometimes. And then now you have to deal with this part of the relationship, which is a lack of accountability. And sometimes the lack of accountability can be something as simple as I'm sorry, not being able to say I'm sorry. And it could be as deep as being mentally, verbally, emotionally abusive and not seeing the wrong in the abuse. So I think we got to just start from the beginning. When two people get together, how do we function in relationships? And then, we talked about these things called red flags. So okay, so Jim, I guess we'll go with you and we'll kind of move along with this. And then I'll drop down to Donnie, try to do the age thing. So when we meet people, how do we miss, how do you, or how do people generally miss people who have a lack of accountability? In your experience, Jim, not even necessarily from your personal relationships, but maybe even people you know that have gotten into relationships with people who lack accountability. How did those, are you aware of how some of those things have occurred, or maybe even you've experienced?
Yeah, I have a few ways that people will miss those self accountability. One of them is they may act the same way themselves or know of people who do and think that is normal. So, depending on your past experiences, your exposure to other people, and through actions, maybe not of their own, but through learned behavior, some of those things that may come up is may seem like it's normal, but it's not. It's usually something that is not permissible, but it's glossed over because those type of behaviors are very normal where they come from, who they interact with and things like that. So that usually sometimes becomes like a gets missed over until they actually experience it and says, maybe hold up, this is this is the wrong step or the wrong way, or something is not right. And when you try to do a course correction, they met with resistance. Another way is normally though you try to think it's not a big deal, or it's something that is I won't say easy correctable, but it's something that probably they think they've grown out of, and they're explaining their past experiences to someone. A lot of people sometimes try to use the past tense of everything that's happened to them up to a certain point. But when people don't like to say what is currently going on with them, most of the people avoid that topic and talk about past tense to make things like, it happened in the past and you moved on and you're doing something else, or that, you're trying new things, but they don't say how, if you gotten over the trauma, or if you've gotten over certain things, or, did you really leave it in the past? It's careful wording sometimes that people use to make sure it's glossed over, or that you won't pay attention to it on the first go around. But, and thirdly, sometimes people just want to skip it because they like the person. Let's be honest, people operate with blinders on when they first meet people, and you really want to give the benefit of the doubt because you really want to make it work, especially if you haven't been in a relationship in a long time. And hope springs eternal, but sometimes you have to listen out for some things that you have to protect yourself with. And while you do try to give the people the benefit of the doubt, you just can't keep ignoring these things. First time, shame on you. Second time, shame on me. So people just have to realize, it's you can't just operate like that when you're really discussing or starting out a relationship.
Yeah, I agree with that. So I guess I want to follow through with this topic, but kind of, as Donnie would say, is pivot. Yeah. So I want to pivot. And by the way, I'm sorry I didn't even introduce us. Did I even introduce us today? I don't
No, you
remember.
didn't. It's okay.
All right. So folks, yeah, it's Jonathan St. James, Jim, and Donnie St. James. Sorry, folks. I'm just a little off today. Just all this rain that soaked me. I got drenched today, full of rain. So yeah, okay. So I wanted to pivot. So Donnie, I'm gonna bring this over to you, and maybe you can help me move this along here. So now I'm going to ask you this, seeing what your perception is. And the question that I have for you is, how soon or how far do we recognize people who lack accountability for their actions or choices or things that they do in life? So I just wanted to get it from a younger perspective. What do you think?
Yeah, okay. Well, first, I'm just gonna have a short version of an answer to the previous question to lead me into that. I think whatever it is that hooks you, the given person, into the situation, it can easily distract you from the things that should make you steer clear from that person. I think a lot of people get caught up in whatever version of the relationship or the person they came up with based on whatever they liked about them. A lot of people get hooked on that whole thing, and then they just get lost in it and then continue far longer than they should. So I think the moment where people are able to realize what's happening, it's usually after it's usually after one of two things. They've gotten whatever it is they thought they wanted, whether it was like sex or something like that, or it's when they find out they're never gonna get what they're looking for. It's usually one of the two. It's just a thing that comes out as you stick in a relationship, you get to know people. I do think some people can willfully ignore signs and perpetuate stuff like that longer, but in general, it's going to be as a result of one of those two things.
All right. So, this is what I was thinking about, and I often reflect on my own personal situations and how I deal with things. So early on in my life, in my younger years, I think I tolerated women who lacked accountability based on their looks, right? So the better looking the woman was, the more tolerant I was for her lack of accountability. Now, if she was, something like, like that, or something like some kind of monstrous looking person, not particularly cute, then of course, when someone is not ultra attractive, you tend to not be tolerant of their behavior. But if someone is beautiful and gorgeous and stuff like that, you tend to, let it go a little while. You tend to be forgiving of some of the lack of personality strength that the person has, and that is lack of accountability. So I find that, and I think the more I matured, the more I was able to evenly spread this discernment for situations that I was getting in, and not be willing to tolerate someone who just doesn't lack any accountability, and everything they do wrong is like, no, there's nothing wrong with me, it's you, or they try to legitimize what they're saying or find some loophole how they're going to point the finger at you when it's something that they're doing to you. So I've learned as I get older to not really rely on looks to be so forgiving of people when they lack accountability versus when I was younger. And of course, looks were everything to me. So if she was beautiful, she got a pass way on in the beginning. And by the time she was out of her free passes, it was usually a relationship ensued. And now there was drama and trauma and hard days and terrible moments for memories. But if she wasn't very attractive, or she was average at best, I can't even get that out, as my man Kevin Samuels would say. Well, I don't want to say my man, but Kevin Samuels, as he would say, average at best, I would be less tolerable of those people, because I'm like, first of all, why am I getting a headache from average looking women? You might as well be fine if you're gonna give me a hard time. I'm sound like Jesse Jackson. You got to draw guitars if you want to organize. But I feel like it's, if I'm gonna just go through something, it's got to be worth it. And 9 times out of 10, it wasn't worth it at all. Even if she was beautiful, Halle Berry type model, dime piece, whatever you want to call it. These, in this day and age, I don't know what young people lit. I don't know whatever they use anymore. Anyway, I've rambled on for a while, but I think you got my sense of where I'm coming from. So Jim, so you heard what I talked about, the looks, and how does that play an effect on you personally? And Donnie, I hope you think of your answer now. Don't let Jim influence you by his thoughts. to change your opinion. If your opinion is, I'm sure you will give your opinion if it differs from his. But I just wanted to know, Jim, what is your experience with looks and tolerating, if you even have any? Because I'm full disclosure that I'm guilty of that. I don't know if you are, but tell me, how about you?
I just I just want to ask you one question before we continue. What was your breaking point when you realized it wasn't worth it? At what age? What was your breaking point? Had there been a breaking point for
So
you?
I would say probably in my 30s. I turned in my 30s, and you start seeing things like people that you're just, and a lot of times it's not even on a romantic level too, because sometimes we do that in a friendship. If you have a
Yeah.
friend, sometimes you're attracted, or you find the friend attractive, or you may be attracted to them. And although you know that there isn't any room for relationships with that person, sometimes your attraction can allow you to be very lenient with that individual. And I found myself in these situations where it's like, why am I dealing with this person? The person's a nightmare. And why would I? And it was a point where I remember I had a particular friend. And in the beginning, when I met her, there was a lot of attraction and probably some residual attraction after that. But I had already knew that there could be nothing other than friendship. But the problem with that was that I still was tolerating her lack of accountability and allowed her to get away. And then finally, we had one fallout, and the fallout really opened my eyes to the fact that although I really tried to be a friend to her because she needed one, that she was not, even though she said she was appreciative, her action didn't prove that at all. To this day and age, like, I realized that the friendship went one way, and not to say that she did it intentionally, but she did it. And even though she claimed responsibility for it, the accountability changed nothing. So even though she said, oh, I was messed up, I did this, I did that, which I often hear a lot of times from women in the past that allegedly grew up and they want to apologize for stuff they did, but they never changed so you say you're accountable, but you don't change your actions to show accountability. And we'll talk about that later.
Yeah,
but I'll let you get in. Hopefully I didn't make you lose your place. And Donnie, I hope I didn't make, by taking it to church there for a second. So Jim, if you need me to rewind something, or
no,
okay.
It's fine.
All right.
I had similar experiences myself, but my tolerance level was a lot shorter than yours. Yeah, I know you could attest to that. I wasn't the person that accepted, BS for too long before I probably open my mouth and say something reckless. Not come up, and that was my problem mostly, not being tactful in my approach to people when it came to certain things. That was definitely my greatest weakness. I had trouble getting girls, women, but I think that I really didn't really have much expectations. But when you come up with from that point of view, you look at people through a different lens. And my lens was was different than most guys. And they probably say, oh, you don't like girls, or stuff like that. But I had my first impression of women was not that great to begin with. And I'm not going to get too much into that, but it was something that it stuck with me. And why, I told I was impatient, you should, relax a bit, stuff like that, but I didn't change that much of my standard of, why did we expect it from a girl? And sometimes when they start doing BS, I had enough BS in my life when I was younger. I didn't need any outside BS attached to it. And, I usually, cut them off, or, step back, fall back for a little bit, and, just, let them do what they want. That was second of my fault. I shouldn't have really done that. Should have been a little bit more vocal. If I really liked them, I should have just said a little bit more. But My experience was that I cut them off early, and just wasn't tactful in how I did it, and it caused a lot of friction. And they used to say, "Oh, it was," then I get, it was my fault because of the way I handled things, and you know, um, you don't have to be like that and things like that. And you know what? I took that side, and I didn't really take it hard, but I understood where they was coming from, and I wasn't vocal back in saying, what the problem was, and it was just my fault. I had poor rapport. It was just totally my fault. My poor rapport. My word game was not very strong, or my verbal acumen was not there yet at the time, and I just sat there, and cool off a bit, and after that, there was no resolution because I wasn't looking for one. I didn't really talk. I wouldn't say I wanted to talk to a person again, but our dynamic had changed at that point, and I just fell back. Most of my problems always fell back, always.
How dare you?
Exactly.
All
That's
right,
exactly
Donnie.
what it was.
So what you have for us on this topic here?
Real quick, you were looking for like not falling for the physical attraction deal, right?
No, we're talking about if your experiences entailed being tolerant of looks, and if you ever experienced that, or people who went through that and dealt with being tolerable for people who, if at all, or if you have knowledge of anyone that really sort of excuse bad behavior, lack of accountability based on how beautiful or attractive the person was.
Yeah, okay. I'm gonna hit on why I avoided that sort of situation. Oh, actually, I think there's a word for this. Yes, there is. I don't really use the word too much, but the word to describe what I often feel is they call it demisexual or whatever. It's basically the describes people who only really have sexual attraction towards people they have some sort of emotional attachment to. So for me, there was never like a way where I could excuse things because somebody was attractive, because I needed more than that to get involved with them in the first place. So because there was that standard in place, it just wasn't a thing for me. And even besides that, just practically speaking, I'm not one who is interested in like competing with other guys for someone who's maybe got an average personality at best. And I feel like a lot of the times the people who are the most generically attractive, for lack of better words, I feel like because they are so what's the word I'm looking for? Traditionally attractive. Because they're so traditionally attractive, they've often not had to put much work into developing themselves in order to build relationships with people. A lot of the time you see they end up being shallow because people just chase them constantly. Those people aren't really my thing either way. So I just generally let other people play that whole game, while I just got invested in my own relationships in my own way.
Yeah. So I wanted to, I guess, sidebar that and talk about Pretty Rich. So unfortunately, none of the ladies, Dawn or Don Maria, here to give a lady's perspective. I wish they could be here, but unfortunately, they're not. Hopefully, we can have some kind of discussion on this with them at some point. But Pretty Rich, I think that goes to something that Donnie said. A lot of times when people are pretty rich, and even men, not just only women, they tend to work all on the outer appearances and the things that generally attract people in the beginning, but don't keep them towards the end. And so because of that, a lot of times there's a lack of accountability, because the more pretty rich you are, the more generally people are tolerant of your bad behavior, whether it's your an attractive woman, attractive man, and you have a lot of things that the opposite sex wants. So I think that often occurs. And so let's talk about Pretty Rich for a moment here, because then I have something after that that I wanted to talk on regarding, I guess, an association with Pretty Rich, but not only just Pretty Rich, but just in general, why some men and women allow themselves to deal with people that have a lack of accountability for their behavior and actions and words. So, Jim, let's hit on Pretty Rich here, and let's talk about that. So, Pretty Rich. Do you think that Pretty Rich causes people to focus on being attractive and less so more having a higher quality of personal or personality characteristics and traits?
A pretty rich is a bad thing for me. It's something that is like what you say. You're pretty rich, but most of these people, women that I've run into, are pretty rich, were intellectually, socially awkward or poor. So they're rich in beauty, but intellectually they were poor. They cannot hold a conversation unless it's about like fashion or music or stuff like that, or some hashtag that they see online, and they try to piggyback off of that. It People will tolerate a pretty rich person because they have self-esteem issues. They're like, with the whole relationship braces, they don't want to have gaps in their relationships from one to another. So for that point that they will tolerate just to be in a relationship, they'll tolerate how a person is as long as they're pretty. They really look at, they're easily swayed. Their mental acumen is easy. These are not the droids you're looking for. The mind tricks are so easily put on them. It's just embarrassing. And I had a girl I used to work with. She was pretty rich. She was pretty rich. All the guys, who will come in for help will always go to her, stuff like that. But when it's time to hold a real conversation, and you know how I am with conversations, especially with something that, I know about or I'm passionate about or it affects people, she could not keep up. And she felt intimidated by that fact that, she couldn't keep up. And, some of the guys will come in defend her, the super simps, the white knights will try to come in to defend her. And I'd be like, no, you don't need to defend her. She brought up the topic. She should be able to clearly get her point across, especially at her age. And she couldn't. And for me, that's a big red flag. And some guys will try to do it to be nice, thinking they get their number or attention or stuff like that. But they're young and they don't understand that when you're at a certain level or a certain age in life or a certain point, you should be able to do things without relying upon the one aspect that you've had since high school. And that lack of growth due to somebody sticking up for you or protecting you or covering for you does not allow you to have your feet to the fire and for you to adapt, change, and grow. You just stay the same way, and you just say hopefully somebody will come and swoop in and help you. And that type of behavior is reckless. You can't rely upon the kindness of strangers. Scarlett O'Hara, you can't do you have to do the opposite. That you can't rely on that because people have their own agendas as well. That's another thing. They have their own agenda, so what they want to do, and they will tolerate it, like what Diane said, until they get what they want from you, that resource, and then ghost you. That's why people get ghosted. When they get that resource or whatever they're looking for, it's poof, gone. Casper, bye. So
message.
So with the pretty rich, they just gotta beware. Just because you get a lot of people doesn't mean you get to keep them. It's getting and keeping is two different things, and that's what they have to realize.
This message is brought to you by Relationship Braces. T-shirt for sale soon. Bringing hearts together. The truth is still straight. Okay, enough of that. All right, Donnie. So you heard Jim over there talking about Pretty Rich. So at the Bank of Donnie St. James, have you had any Pretty Rich accounts come across your teller?
No, I wanted to hit on something that he mentioned actually. He had mentioned the mind games, and I wasn't even thinking about that beforehand. I have seen pretty rich people, rather than figuring out how to improve upon the quality of their character, there's more efforts put towards masking the lack of it, I guess. I think most commonly you see it via some sort of vaguely interesting hobby. A lot of pretty rich people will develop some sort of hobby that they can market themselves on. Usually like an instrument, maybe a social media presence or something like that.
Mm.
And sort of use that to sort of fake some sort of substance that like as you said, one of the biggest signs are when they have nothing to talk about, can't hold the conversation, but those hobbies allow them to talk about themselves, and make themselves more, I guess, marketable or appealing. So you see that happen all the time, and it really amounts to nothing. Um, and even more so, you'll see a lot of pretty rich people will sort of use the number of people interested in them as like validation to justify
Mm.
like the worth of them or like their personality or whatever. I think pretty rich people are, over time, they just get increasingly better at covering up their lack of anything.
Aha!
Yeah, that's true. So definitely that happens often with pretty rich people, and I've seen it, and I've been a victim of, I'll say a victim and a volunteer, because I knew, but you know what it is, sometimes you gamble on people and you think, well, that person is capable of changing, and then you give them a shot and then they end up not changing. And like I said, this pretty rich situation doesn't always fall into relationships, in terms of romance. It can be friendships as well. Sometimes we have people who are attractive friends. Men have a very attractive women friends, and women have very attractive, and it's just something about people being attractive that allow people to just look at them differently than they would an average person or someone who's not attractive. And like I said, I've been a victim where I've invested in, some women that were attractive, but it wasn't generally in regards a thought of having a sexual relationship or intimate or romantic relationship. Sometimes you just like how someone looks, even though they're bad for you. But a lot of times like, I'm not tolerating this person. And like I said, I've been a victim and a volunteer where I've allowed someone who was extremely pretty rich to just, and I won't say the things they did to me were intentional, but they didn't do anything to stop it. So at some point, I think there's some level of intent once you know about it and you chose to do nothing, or the way that you choose to handle your lack of accountability for the way that you treat someone, or talk to someone, whatever it is to ghost them or to break up with them, or whatever the situation is. So I find that you will see people like that. They could be at fault and they could be doing something to you, and you call them out like, hey, I don't like that. And then their reaction to you is, I'm ghost, I'm not talking to you. And next thing you know, it's 3 years they don't talk to you, or 4 or 5 years, and usually they hit some kind of wall. Oh man, I feel bad for the way I treated you, and stuff like that. So the next topic that I wanted to get into was, and I think this has to do with pretty rich, but this is on the opposite side of the person that is tolerating these types of behaviors, and that's a lack of options. So there are a lot of people who lack options in relationships, friendships, and things like that, and allow themselves to be treated this way by people who lack accountability and choose, and even after you explain to them that they're doing something or saying something that's wrong or inappropriate, that they do nothing to alter that or change it or fix it. And they'll find a way to point the finger back at you. So here's the thing. When people bring something to your attention, whether they're right or wrong, the first thing you should really do is listen to what that person is saying and find the merits of that argument. But a lot of times, what people will do, again, we've said this on many episodes of these podcasts, is that people listen to reply and almost never listen to understand what the person is saying. So while let's say Jim, I have a problem with something Jim did. So a lot of times a Jim, let's not say Jim over here on the show, but I'll just use Jim, General Jim. So General Jim or Jim in general, I have an issue with him. And instead of listening to why I have an issue and find clarity, that Jim is already waiting for me to finish my final syllable and put the period on the predicate of the sentence and then respond to whatever he wants to get off his chest. Well, listen here, guy. I don't know who you think you are, because I'm just trying to speak up for myself. I'm just trying to get my point across, and just basically skated over everything I said. So this happens in a lot in relationships between friends, intimate relationships, boyfriend, girlfriend, sometimes husband and wives, where the person just doesn't have options. And so because they don't have options, they're susceptible to these tongue twisters, sometimes susceptible to allow people to exist in their universe when they shouldn't tolerate them. So Jim, how about that? So what do you think in terms of when I say the lack of options that people have in terms of romantic relationships and even sometimes friendships, because I find that friends go through this as well.
That's definitely a major factor, is lack of options. People unfortunately like familiarity. They don't like to branch out. They don't like to explore or go into new things. They don't do the Trek way. They boldly go where no brand has gone before. And they stay within their circle, and they will like to keep that circle no matter what. And in that type of thinking, you suspect, like you say, suspect yourself to these type of behaviors and abuses from other people, because that you want to keep them around in your life, because you don't want to, you know them, you don't want to venture out, and you don't want to do things, try and do new things, especially the older you get, the circle you try to keep small. That is an unfortunate way of looking at things like that, because when you do have a problem, they know that you're not going to really get rid of them because you had problems with them before. So the options of you, trying to, set them straight or stuff like that, it's like 0 to 0, and they know it. Second, when you talk to the person and then they try to reverse the topic, that means, to me, that's a flag saying that more than one person probably try to talk to you about this, and then you just flip the script on, like how this became about me when I, was talking about you and in your attitude. Individuals like to bring in unrelated topics to the argument that has nothing to do with the topic at hand. They have something on their chest, and and like Uno, they play the reverse card. As soon as you come out, reverse card. That's it. They keep these things in their head, and then when it's time to, use it, they'll use it. It's not, fair, because, they're not telling you what's wrong either. They're just using it as a tool to get over. And it's very disrespectful, because you as a friend should be able to talk to your close friends supposedly about issues or problems that you may have, and, to address it. And, it doesn't have to be allayed, but as long as it's recognized. And I think people would like for you to recognize that you may have problems or issues when they talk to you. So they know it's hard for you to get over, and people are very understanding generally, but you have to recognize it. And most people don't, and they don't want to.
All right, Donnie. So it's your turn. You heard what Jim and myself said. What say you?
Yeah, I would say, when you feel like you can't get better than whatever you got right now, you end up latching on to literally anything as if it was like a feast that you spotted after like a 3-day fast, right? I think the biggest misconception here is that being in a relationship is automatically better than being single. I think a lot of people have that idea in their head, which is why you'll see people who maybe don't have as many options for whatever reason. It's why you see them getting into not thought out situations. I think what people need to understand is that while being single can end in loneliness, for sure, loneliness will almost always be preferable to misery, at least in my own opinion. I don't think that's a crazy take. Yeah, and we've mentioned it before on previous episodes, relationships anyway are meant to add to happiness, not be the happiness. So even if supposedly whatever person couldn't get better than what they had, the relationship isn't even set up right in its foundation. So just for that alone, they shouldn't be in it.
I agree with that. So that definitely two good perspectives there with Jim and Donnie. And I hope that people are really keeping score here, because it's very important that when you're involved with people that you are able to identify when people lack accountability, because when you really like someone, you are more tolerating of what people say and do to you, because you want that energy around you. And I don't mean the energy of the lack of accountability, but the energy of attractiveness. There's a feel good when you're around attractive people. I mean, Miss America or Halle Berry or someone like that comes going, hey, what's up? I want to date you, or I want to be your friend, or someone like that. People get joy in being around attractive people. Let's be honest. People, it's just how it is. It's like almost like meeting a celebrity. People just get excited when it's the celebrity that they like comes around and like, oh, hey, you're my favorite actor. And the person is nice and pleasant and stuff like that. It's a very enjoyable experience. So I think people need to understand that. And I'm going to really jump on what Donnie said there about, when people are when they see attractive people, there's a certain ideology that they have, and lack of options, where when they have lack of options, or even not even necessarily an attractive person. Sometimes when you have a lack of options, it can be a less than attractive person and you're still tolerable for that, because you can't even find an average person. So when an average person comes along, you tolerate that too. So I think the point is really being able to, and this is the point that I was trying to talk about with Donnie. I kind of got off track there. I feel like Jack and the Beanstalk over there kind of sold a cow for some magic beans. But anyway, he says something that made a lot of sense. And that is, people a lot of times think that being in a relationship trumps being single. And I get where there's an importance of not being alone. The average person doesn't want to be alone. Luther Vandross said that many times. I was not meant to live alone. A lot of people feel like that. And a lot of people die alone trying not to be alone. So that happens more times than not. But here's the thing. You can't be afraid to be in a meaningful relationship. You can't be afraid to be alone. You have to be able to say, I'm willing to take as much time as it takes to find the right person. And the more time you take, the more time you will find you weed out these toxic people. And I don't want to call them intentionally toxic, because sometimes just people just have these bad habits that die hard, and or old habits, as they say. Old habits die hard, but they have these bad habits inside of them, and they need to let go of them. And a lot of times people don't know how to let go of these bad habits, because they've pretty much, I would say a lot of times, self-sabotage people, because they have issues with themselves. So you'll find a lot of times the people who lack these accountabilities are people who have done this as a defense mechanism to protect themselves from other people. So it's almost like a fight. So you meet someone, and they're really fighting from their own they're fighting their own vulnerability. So you'll meet these people who lack accountability, but there's a vulnerability inside of them that they're trying to keep people away from. So they do things to you. It's like the what is Fred Sanford used to have a saying, do unto others before they can do unto you. So that happens a lot when you have people who lack accountability. A lot of times these people have some type of trauma in their lives or experience some trauma in their life that they're like, I refuse to allow somebody to get through my walls. So they create these characteristics inside of them that sort of beat people up. And it's not necessarily in a malicious way, but it's sort of a self-protection, self-defense type of situation. And I don't want to excuse people for doing it, but as we say here, we got to understand where people come from. So sometimes there are people who they're really trying to protect themselves, but by the same time, they do it at their detriment because they're not doing it the right way. So let's talk about that for a few minutes. So Jim, Donnie, I see a light bulb came on and not the one in your room. So hold on to that place there because I see you got something. But Jim, let's talk about that. Let's talk about people who are really trying to just defend themselves and they're doing it in the wrong way. Do you know people? And I know you know people that, so if you tell me no, let me tell you, if you tell me no right now, I'm going to give you this. I'm going to give you this right now. Hold on.
My detector test determined that was a lie.
There you go. So now tell me what it is you have to say.
Yes, I know plenty of people like that. Get them before they get you type mentality, things like that. Look, I know it's hard letting go. I know it's hard, it hurts and you don't want to go through that feeling again. That some hurts people can't share with you no matter how hard you try. And it's tough to get over, but in those instances, you should really ask yourself, are you ready to be in another relationship? And if not, you're just going to have to let it go. Let it be until you learn to let it go. It's not fair to yourself or to other people that you're acting out against a person that had nothing to do with your past trauma. You have to learn. That's why you get into relationships. I always try to tell people, try to start off with a clean slate. And then, if you see red flags and stuff like that, you mark it down mentally, make a mental check. But you have to give the person the equal chance that you gave the person who gave you the trauma. You gave them a chance to first start it off. Why is it that somebody else have to pay for another person's mistake? Only Jesus Christ has done that. Nobody else has done it yet. So let's just get off of that point. Get off of that. Secondly, listen, being alone for a little bit to find yourself or to find what maybe you didn't like and not what you do prefer at the time or how you are as a person will help you into selecting out or another person that you want to be in a relationship with. It allows you to be realistic about what you want from another person besides, you defending yourself or using them as an outlet to compensate for what has happened for you and you had no other way to release it. Try to find an outlet for yourself that healthy outlet that will allow you to move on and to try again with somebody else. You have to let that go, either through hobbies, through therapy, through something that will allow you to step back, to grow, to heal, and then to move forward with somebody else. You cannot expect somebody else to accept your trauma, understand your trauma, tolerate your trauma, and you offer nothing back. It's you gotta give them gray hairs, and then when that same issue comes up, you go feel abandoned. Now you feel like you have abandonment issues. It's just a slippery slope, and it's hard, to let people in. It's hard to open up, especially when things like that happen to you. But at some point, you're gonna have to say enough is enough. I can't do it like this anymore. And I have to find a center that will allow me to let this go and to restart over with someone else.
All right, Donnie. So now it's been a long time. I shouldn't have left you without a strong beat to step to. All right. So now you heard what I said and Jim said. What is your thoughts on this?
I'm gonna sound like a broken record here, but people who have these crazy defense mechanisms where they just kind of project whatever they're concerned about onto new partners and things like that, they need to be single. It's gonna sound like I hate relationships.
Facts.
Like it's just gonna come across that way. That's not the idea. But once again, oh man, once again, I've seen it happen. They want to protect themselves, so they could recreate the same environment that they just got out of, essentially, as a result. Not on purpose, of course, but it's what happens. I've also seen these people turn down a good relationship in order to get back with that previous toxic situation because the familiarity was comfortable and at least they knew what they'd get out of it. So they were okay with getting whatever they were scared of because they know that's what they're going to get. They can't handle the idea of getting it again from somebody else. It's a weird self-fulfilling cycle. But yes, Jim gave some good resources to go try to work through those things. So I think afterwards, when we're now trying to go into a new relationship, I guess what the advice there is, rather than project whatever your concerns are onto this new person, I'd say the easiest way to take it is just by, from the beginning, we mentioned it before, having your expectations known. Just make it clear that the relationship needs to develop at a slower rate. That's also not really an issue. And if you're keeping the other person in on it at the start, they're not going to feel like they're being let on or anything. It's not that big of a deal. Or if they're not comfortable with going at a slower rate, that doesn't make them a bad person. That's their choice. Relationships are a two-way street. So if they're not comfortable with going at your pace, that's fine. Two of you just separate and then you move on to the next person. And hey, if that was going to be a toxic situation, you avoided it by just making your thoughts known. It's simpler than it seems, I think.
Yeah, I agree with that. Let's hear what Barack Obama has to say.
Hello, everybody.
Okay, so what do you have to say, President Obama?
Don't make someone else clean up your mess.
Okay, I agree with that. So definitely, you heard what Obama said.
Fair enough.
Clean up your own mess. Don't let somebody else clean it up for you. I think it's very important, all jokes aside and everything. I like to laugh and have light moments, but there's the seriousness to this discussion. And the point is to hold people accountable and to hold yourself accountable. A lot of times, even us, sometimes we can lack accountability too. So it's not only to say when other people are lacking accountability, not to point it out, but also you got to look at yourself and you got to see if you're being accountable for your actions. Because I'll admit that there's been times in my life I wasn't accountable for my actions and said things or didn't do things, because part of an accountability is when you're not doing your part, to be like, listen, I'm not doing my part. I need to do better, and admitting that. And I think the problem here is whether it's foolish pride or is just not knowing your dysfunction, whether it's not accepting that things in your life cause trauma that sort of influence you to not step up to the plate when you should step up to the plate. Those are a lot of things that who was that just put their face in the camera?
That's Sean Jr.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
All right. So like I was saying, there has to be accountability on both sides. So a lot of times it's not only to say, oh, let me see that person over there that's not accountable. On the flip side, are you being accountable for your own actions? Because if you're not, then you're just as bad as those people that are not being accountable for their actions to you. And like I said, I've been guilty of that in my life. Actually doing these podcasts has opened my eyes to actually learning to be accountable for things on a daily basis, work, friendship, relationships, things like that. So you have to seek accountability for what you're doing in your daily vocations, as well as expect it from other people. And don't allow people to get into your life without being accountable for things they say and do, because it's not fair to you. And I'm sure they wouldn't want anybody to do it in return to them. So you gotta create a standard of accountability. That's gotta be before anything. You gotta that's something you can't avoid. You have to be accountable, and you have to hold other people accountable. And if they can't be accountable for their actions, you got to bounce, or you got to bounce them, whatever is the situation there, because it's just going to lead to a lot of heartache. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about the accountability sometimes that people lack from themselves. So Jim, the conch is given to you, and now you're on the clock there.
Yes. Accountability for yourself. Yes, you must lead by example. I learned that from a lot of people in my life. You know, being able to do that shows strength. It does show a lot of strength to people, to be honest with you, trying to lead by example. So when you do your own accountability, you take your own inventory, and secondly, you're not ashamed, not even ashamed, but you're not trying to use it as a way to manipulate others and to say that, I'm just, to do it in that type of unselfish way. It most of the time it does get reciprocated, not the way that you may want it, but it does get reciprocated in the best way the other person knows how. And the intent of the other person may not seem so sinister, and it may be due to ignorance, and you could be able to tolerate a little more and try to educate them along. So for me, I always held myself accountable at work and, at home life now. And through that type of, I won't say leadership, but a type of accountability of not being ashamed of it, but saying that, there is a power, I am doing something about it. I have done this, I've done that, and to take a personal inventory of yourself, not even to explain anything to anyone, but to explain to yourself and to make sure that you have to improve upon yourself, because that's the only person who can really do this is yourself. It shows to others that you will not accept certain things, because people will get that vibe from you. You will not accept certain things because you do not expect that of yourself. And if people pick up on that and they'll convey that, they will know certain things that you can and can't do, and they will avoid you. I get avoided a lot because of my type of attitude, my type of I won't say forceful nature, but the type of personality that I have. It allows people to know what type of person I am, and they make the decision for me, if they're toxic, not to deal with me, or to keep me at arm's length because they know I will not tolerate those certain things. So I don't attract those certain things because the way I held myself to others, for show and present myself to others, attitude-wise and things like that, because it won't be tolerated, it won't be accepted. And as long as you keep inventory of yourself and you try to improve yourself upon those issues that you have, and to strengthen your positives that you already have already, most of the time you won't even attract those things.
All right, Donnie. So it's your turn at the plate.
Gotcha. That Michael Jackson really threw me off there. I'm just glad I write things down. Practically speaking, if you're going to be giving advice or passing any sort of judgment, as Jim said, you got to lead by example. You got to practice what you preach. Anything you say will ring hollow if you can't do the same yourself. Now, that aside, what I'd say is a lack of accountability is basically like the lack of the ability to admit that there's room for growth. And there isn't any stage in anybody's life where they become perfect. I mean, that concept is intentionally unrealistic and unattainable. That's not something that any one person can just be. You can always strive to be better. And I've even caught myself not taking accountability before. I think a lot of people probably would have a situation like this where maybe you're in a relationship where for the most part you're pretty good, but there are things that you're doing that you're not taking account for because the other person in the relationship is maybe statistically doing more negative things. I had one of those situations where, because there was maybe at least somewhat more toxicity coming from the other person, I was able to overlook whatever I was doing. But what you end up finding out is, when you get into a relationship that's any amount better than whatever you previously had, you're going to realize you're now the only person pulling that kind of crap. And then you are forced to actually look upon yourself and change. Or maybe you ended up losing a potential situation because you came incorrectly. Accountability can lead to your future ruin. So a lack of accountability, I should say, can lead to your future ruin. So you got to make sure to stay on top of what it is you're putting into relationships or into the world.
He ain't gonna be in Rush Hour 3.
I agree with that. So hopefully you've gotten something from this conversation today. I think this is a very good conversation, ending a Saturday night in the thick of the weekend. And I hope that people realize accountability is very important to the success of a relationship. Without it, you're just going to run into a brick wall, whether you tolerate it for a long time or you constantly are fighting against it. You have to seek out people who are willing to hold you accountable and to be willing to accept the criticism that you're giving, or even the constructive criticism, because that's really what it should be. When somebody's lacking accountability, you gotta give them constructive criticism, not just point the finger at them, not just blast them for the things that they're doing, but you got to give them a chance to fix the things that are wrong. Now, if they refuse to address it, well, that's a different story. So I think we're going to end this show here. This was a good conversation. Jim and Donnie, I'll let you get your final words in, and then we will end this conversation.
Thanks. Everyone, be true to yourself. Portray what you want to be, and portray what you want to give and what you want to receive from others.
Donnie?
I'd say don't settle for less than you have to, and give yourself whatever time it is you need to actually be ready for whatever you want to put yourself into.
That's a good thing to say. And then Eddie Murphy just has this message here.
Look, man, I ain't falling for no banana in my tailpipe.
There you go. So don't fall for the banana in the tailpipe. You got to keep on your toes. You got to be mindful of the things that you're doing and that are going on around you. So I'm not playing any more outros with Gangsta's Paradise. Got flagged last time. I didn't get flagged the first time. So folks, until I get an outro instrumental, we'll catch you on the flip side. Take care and farewell. Arrivederci.
Here.
Take care.